It's time to eat.
What are you hungry for?
Sit down and get ready to consume an abundance of fantasy football knowledge from Ross Tucker and Joe Dolan.
Feed me now. I'm starving.
On the Fantasy Feast Eating Podcast.
Yeah, let's eat, baby. It is the Fantasy Feast Eating Podcast. We are, of course, presented by DraftKings wherever you are. DraftKings or the DraftKings Sportsbook app. Make sure you use that glorious code ROSS to get the discounts and deals that they have for you. We are 2 weeks and a day away from the NFL draft. It is wild how quickly that day jumps up on you when you are least expecting it. Very much looking forward to that, and including the next two episodes, Joe, where you and I dive into some of the skill position players pre-draft. Just your thoughts and the thoughts of some of the other Fantasy Points colleagues as to what players they're higher or lower on than others. But we do want to wrap up the drafts, or the free agency series, I should say, talking about wide receivers. Most of you know I'm Ross Tucker, former NFL offensive lineman, 5 teams, 7 years. Obviously, got a bunch of different podcasts. Hopefully, you guys are binging the College Draft Podcast with Emory Hunt because it's fantastic and we go over every position. Same thing can be said, quite frankly, about Thursdays with Greg Cosell on the Ross Tucker Football Podcast. And if you like to make wagers on the NFL Draft, Steve Fezzik and I are starting to dive into that on the Even Money Betting Podcast. You want to make sure you're all over that. You're ready to go. And using the code ROSS over on the DraftKings Sportsbook app as I'm about to sneeze.
Bless you.
Play-by-play of the sneeze there, Joe.
Does anybody say Gesundheit anymore, or is that just in cartoons?
You know what? I haven't heard Gesundheit in a long time. And now that you say it, I just remembered how to spell it. Gesundheit.
I'm a spelling guy, Ross. When we discuss it's a weird icebreaker, I guess. But when I go to a restaurant and there's a waiter or a waitress who has a name that's common but can be spelled multiple ways, I always like if, for instance, if it's Megan, I ask if there's an H in it or not. I don't know. It's one of those weird things. I guess that's my
You ask
little
if there's an M in there. Is there an M in there at the start? I bet.
Yeah, I think that's about right for a Megan. Yeah.
Hey, Joe's a great follow on social for fantasy information at FG_Dolan. His website, fantasypoints.com, is as good of a website as there is that's out there, and it's the best value. Just use the code 24FEAST to get the discount. You can check me out on social at Ross Tucker NFL. All the shows get posted, and the highlight clips of the shows get posted to at Ross Tucker Pod on social media, or youtube.com/Ross Tucker NFL. Love those of you that rate and review the show. You automatically get to ask Joe a question on the show if you rate and review the show, and then email me that screenshot, ross@rosstucker.com. Last but not least, Joe, we got to dive into these receivers. Interestingly, and similarly to the tight ends that we talked about at the end of last week's show, a lot of these guys re-signed with teams. The bigger names, right? Yeah. Mike Evans, Michael Pittman. I will say there is a question mark out there still about Tee Higgins. For people that are doing best balls this time of year, what are you telling them?
I presume that the Bengals are going to work something out with Tee Higgins. But if not, you would think he's going to be somebody who could command a really interesting draft pick kind of compensation in the NFL draft. So the NFL draft might be the point where a guy like Tee Higgins, remember a couple years ago we saw A.J. Brown and Hollywood Brown get moved during the NFL draft. Tee Higgins is a name to watch there. It's certainly a name to watch as it pertains to the Kansas City Chiefs, who have a potential legal situation with Rashee Rice following that accident in the Dallas metro area. He is reportedly cooperating with authorities, but there could be some discipline. Who knows what's going to happen with the Rashee Rice situation? And the Chiefs are always a team that we view as needing wide receivers. We say they need wide receivers. They don't think they do because they've won back-to-back Super Bowls without any of them. But hey, what do we know? They signed Hollywood Brown, but they could be a team that's out there for Tee Higgins. Any team looking to kind of get maybe a young quarterback, a number one wide receiver could be interested in Tee Higgins in the NFL draft. So I think Tee Higgins right now with an ADP in the 4th round, that's actually pretty fair because if he's back with the Bengals, he'll pay off that 4th round. If he gets traded somewhere else, you presume he's going to have an opportunity to be a number one for that team. So I think where Tee Higgins is going, that is very fair. By the way, we are recording this. If you're listening to this today, we recorded this last week, so maybe Tee Higgins has been moved. I doubt it because I think the draft is the next inflection point, but we'll see about that as it comes to the Tee Higgins situation.
Biggest name, biggest contract to move teams, Joe, was Calvin Ridley going to the Tennessee Titans. What does that do for you from a fantasy perspective?
Well, what it says to me, most interestingly, because I'm not 100% sure I have a ton of interest in Ridley himself. He was very inconsistent last year. He had games where he was huge. He had games where he disappeared. What it says to me is, man, the Titans are really trying to see if they have something in Will Levis, aren't they? You have Calvin Ridley and DeAndre Hopkins. They brought in Tony Pollard. It's going to be an offense that is built around Will Levis, and I'm not trying to tell you that Will Levis is good. I'm just saying the Titans want to find out if Will Levis is good. I expect that they are just an overwhelming favorite, Ross. I'm sure you've studied this offensive tackle class, which is expected to be just phenomenal. I think it's a great offensive line class in general in the draft. But, Ross, have you seen any mocks right now that have the Titans not drafting an offensive tackle in the top 10 of the draft?
No, because they are.
Yeah,
and that's fine. They should. And honestly, signing Calvin Ridley gives them the chance to do that now.
Yeah, just take the offensive tackle. Take Joe Alt, take Olu Fashanu, whichever one you want. Fuaga from Oregon State. Take whichever one you want. And everybody will defend that pick. But Ridley, I don't have a ton of interest in him as a 5th round pick for fantasy. Ridley topped 20 fantasy points 6 times last year, but he failed to score more than 8.7 times. Frankly, I'm more interested in him in best ball than I am in drafting him for season long, where I have to make lineup decisions. The Titans are almost certainly going to go more pass heavy. They were 30th in pass attempts, 29th in passing yards, and 29th in passing touchdowns last season. They are going to go more pass heavy under Brian Callahan. I just think this gives me more interest in Will Levis as a quarterback too than it does in Calvin Ridley or DeAndre Hopkins, who I think might kind of vulture each other here a little bit from a fantasy football perspective.
What about, you talked about him a little bit earlier, about Hollywood Brown with the Chiefs, Joe?
So this is going to be a really popular best ball pick, and for good reason, because you kind of view Hollywood Brown now as being somebody who can do the field stretching of a Marquez Valdez-Scantling, but actually be good at it. Sky Moore was a disaster last year. Kadarius Toney cannot stay on the field. Rashee Rice, as we just mentioned, has the potential legal situation. So, and Hollywood Brown's getting drafted in the 6th round for best ball. That is just the number one right spot for him. I would not be surprised if he has a really good season with Patrick Mahomes, just somebody who establishes a rapport. We saw Hollywood Brown. He was a guy who, when he was playing with Baltimore, established a rapport with a really good quarterback, and I wouldn't be shocked if that's what happens with Mahomes. I like this deal for the Chiefs. I don't love Hollywood Brown as a player, but this is a really good 1-year signing for the Chiefs because he's just the perfect player for them and what they like to do. You know Mahomes is going to take shots down the field, but as we've said, Hollywood Brown's a guy who kind of sneakily at points has been a target hog. So he can kind of do both things for Kansas City, which is why I really like this signing, and I love him for best ball as a 6th round pick.
What about Gabe Davis down there with the Jags? I saw where Doug Peterson's calling him a Swiss Army knife, Joe. Does that make you feel good or bad?
Well, yeah, Swiss Army knife in that he's going to score you 20 fantasy points or 0 fantasy points. The thing about Gabe Davis that makes this interesting is maybe it gives me a little bit more interest in Travis Etienne, because Gabe Davis is a great blocker. He's a big body, deep threat on the perimeter, blocking in front of James Cook out there. He ran 85% of his routes on the outside. He is almost exclusively a perimeter wide receiver. 15.7 yards per reception or better in each of his 4 seasons playing with Josh Allen. You figure that the Jaguars are going to utilize him similarly with Trevor Lawrence. Lawrence was 9th in deep throw rate, just ahead of Allen, believe it or not, among 35 quarterbacks with 200 or more passing attempts. He's a downfield outside complement to Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram and Zay Jones. I'm more interested in Kirk and Ingram as from a target hog perspective than I am in Gabe Davis. But from a best ball perspective, you know what Gabe Davis does. He scores touchdowns, he makes big catches, and he puts up goose eggs. From a best ball perspective, I am okay with Gabe Davis on my roster. After falling for the trap the last 2 years, I think I'm done drafting Gabe Davis in season long. However, as a 10th, 11th round best ball pick, I'm in on Gabe Davis as a touchdown scorer.
I'm in on Labatt Blue Light as my favorite light beer of all time because it's delicious, because it's all we drank when we were up in Buffalo. The whole table with Bledsoe and everybody would be all Labatt Blue Lights, as I did with my teammates. So why don't you drink some Labatt Blue Lights with your teammates or friends or family or whoever? Live life to the power of we. Always enjoy responsibly. Beer, Labatt USA, Buffalo, New York. Joe, let's discuss Darnell Mooney going to the Falcons with Kirk Cousins. They have Drake London, they have Bijan Robinson, they have Kyle Pitts. What does that mean for your man Mooney?
So Darnell Mooney, to me, 3-year, $39 million, gave him pretty much the same deal as Gabe Davis. Look, you go from Arthur Smith's run-heavy attack to a pass-heavy attack. When you sign Kirk Cousins, you're going to throw the ball a lot, and they have the weapons to throw the ball. Really, Mooney, I don't want to just say a depth signing, but they needed receivers behind Drake London. He's been a fantasy afterthought the last 2 years because of Chicago's run-heavy attack and injuries that Mooney's had. But he had 1,000-plus receiving yards and was the wide receiver 31 in 2021. So he's had some fantasy relevance in the past. But he had career worst across the board with the Bears trading for DJ Moore. And honestly, Ross, some of the biggest moves of the free agency period were trades at the wide receiver position, which we should get to. But that's neither here nor there. Mooney was 9th in yards after the catch per reception among 81 wide receivers who saw 50 or more targets. He's a primary slot receiver. 60% of his routes or more from the slot in the last 2 seasons, but he's also worked on the perimeter. So it gives them some alignment versatility under offensive coordinator Zach Robinson. He probably is going to have like the Jordan Addison role. Addison was the wide receiver 15 last year with Kirk Cousins. I just think it's a worse version of what Minnesota had with Drake London and Mooney as the avatars for Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. But Kirk Cousins has been able to support multiple fantasy-relevant wide receivers throughout the majority of his career. Mooney's speed is going to open up Atlanta's new-look offense. He's going to have some fantasy moments as a volatile wide receiver 4. I can endorse drafting Darnell Mooney as a kind of bench wide receiver on your best ball teams.
While we're talking about the Falcons and you mentioned trades, I'm assuming you got nothing for Rondale Moore, or is he a best ball guy?
No. I mean, I think it's an interesting move from the idea of Rondale Moore has always been better than the reality of Rondale Moore. Like, Greg Dortch has been a better Rondale Moore than Rondale Moore has been. So, look, like when somebody's got Rondale Moore's interesting level of wiggle and talent, I think a creative coach can find a way to use him. Maybe, I'm not saying these guys are the same player, but you know how Tutu Atwell had some moments with the Rams, but never was fantasy relevant? Maybe that's Rondale Moore this year.
What about some of these other trades, Joe? Maybe the most notable, Keenan Allen and his $23 million salary going to the Chicago Bears to play with Caleb Williams. I'm really curious to hear how that affects his fantasy value in your mind.
Well, for Keenan Allen now, this is a guy who I think the Chargers have wanted to try to let him age gracefully. You know, we're going to draft Mike Williams, or we're going to draft Quentin Johnston, and we're going to try to take some of that load off of Keenan Allen. And then Mike Williams gets hurt. Quentin Johnston doesn't emerge as a rookie, and Keenan's like, all right, guys, guess I'll do it again. Here we go. I'm picking up the slack. You know, like at work, sometimes you're just like, oh, this young guy who was supposed to help me, he not saying he sucks, but he's not cut out for it yet. Keenan Allen's just been like, all right, guys, here we go again. Just throw me the ball 150 times because I'm the only one here who's reliable. He's dealt with some injuries, but now I wonder if the Bears are actually going to allow him to age a little bit gracefully, because he is coming in with a young wide receiver 1 in DJ Moore, who was phenomenal for fantasy with a quarterback who couldn't throw the football. So DJ Moore, wide receiver 9, with a quarterback who couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. And an offense that was incredibly run heavy. So I anticipate that Caleb Williams is going to be better than Justin Fields. I expect that this team is going to throw the ball more. And Keenan Allen is going to be able to benefit from the fact that DJ Moore is here, and DJ Moore is the number 1. There are no presuppositions that Keenan Allen's going to come in here and take over DJ Moore's role as the wide receiver 1. I think Keenan Allen is a little bit overvalued right now on best ball sites. He's going as kind of a borderline 3rd, 4th round draft pick. I don't know if there's going to be that much volume in Chicago. I'd probably pass on him at that point. DJ Moore is a 2nd round pick, by the way. I much more prefer DJ Moore at that price than Keenan Allen at his price. But I think Keenan Allen, this is a spot where he's going to be able to play the slot and age gracefully with the Chicago Bears after handling so much work over the last decade with the LA Chargers.
It's unbelievable how quickly, like, that was kind of what you thought of with the Chargers. You thought of Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, and Austin Eckler. They're all gone. Mike Williams is now with the Jets, Joe. Curious your thoughts on Williams being the number 2 behind Garrett Wilson there in Gang Green.
Yeah, and well, let's see which of Aaron Rodgers' buddies might end up there. Maybe there's going to be some trades. I think the Jets have had interest in Devontae Adams. The Raiders are saying they're not trading Devontae Adams, and I don't expect that they will at this point. Mike Williams, right, to me, look, I know this is kind of a cop-out. He's a best ball guy. He's like, at this point, like, I kind of view him as the Jets version of Gabe Davis. Like, maybe he'll have a couple huge games and some zeros. Garrett Wilson is by far the number 1 with the Jets, and the Jets are also going to run the hell out of the football because Breece Hall's a stud. So that's a Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson offense. Anything Mike Williams gives them is a positive. He is going off the board in the 9th round for best ball. That's about right from my perspective.
Joe, is Diontae Johnson sneaky in Carolina at all down there? They need receivers.
Oh, they need anybody.
They've got Bryce Young. Diontae Johnson's always had ability. Is he kind of falling under the radar a little bit right now?
Well, he's going in the 6th and 7th round for fantasy, so that's, for a guy who is so far and away his team's number 1 receiver, that actually does feel like I mean, there's nobody on this team who's even close. How many times did I say last year on the podcast when we're breaking down Carolina's offense, which by the end of the year, Ross, we didn't really break down Carolina's offense. We just kind of skipped over them. But how many times did I say, I love Adam Thielen? Adam Thielen has been a godsend for what would Bryce Young's season have looked like without Adam Thielen? But if Adam Thielen's your best player in the year 2023, you are in major trouble. And they needed Diontae Johnson or a player of that caliber in Carolina. I am not 100% ready to give up on Bryce Young. I loved Bryce Young coming out of Alabama. I said I would have drafted him at number 1 overall. Right now, if you redo that draft, 100% of people would take C.J. Stroud, and that's probably the right call at this point. But Bryce Young was in no position to succeed last year whatsoever. The offensive line struggled. They put a lot of money into the offensive line. Robert Hunt, Damian Lewis coming in to play on the interior. And I think, Ross, maybe you can give me some insight here. I think for a quarterback the size of Bryce, and I don't think you ever played with a quarterback the size of Bryce Young. Maybe you did when you were playing in Harrisburg, but I don't know about in the NFL. I feel like the interior of the offensive line is even more important for a quarterback like that. And that's where Carolina invested their money this offseason.
Yes, I would agree. And yes, they did. You got to keep the pocket firm so he has room to see and room to step up. What about Jerry Jeudy with the Browns? I feel like that trade's gotten a lot of attention.
Oh, Jerry Aguilar. Again, compare Jerry Jeudy's numbers to Nelson Aguilar. I dare you, and tell me which is the better player. I mean it. Like, Nelson Aguilar and Jerry Jeudy's statistical profile are incredibly similar, which is fascinating because Jerry Jeudy's getting $41 million guaranteed from the Browns, and Nelson Aguilar is still a punchline for dropping passes. He was with Cortland. Look, the thing about Jeudy is he's never played with a good NFL quarterback. The question I have is, does he have one now? Deshaun Watson hasn't been good in 4 years, Ross. Joe Flacco was better than him last year. So Jerry Jeudy getting all this money. Look, the Browns are loaded on offense. Nick Chubb's coming back. Amari Cooper's there. David Njoku's there. The offensive line is strong. This is a loaded offense. The problem is the trigger man any good? Now, I think Deshaun Watson, with the talent around him, can certainly put up some numbers, but I am not falling for the Jerry Jeudy trap anymore. I'm not doing it, and I don't think anybody else is either. He is a 10th, 11th round draft pick on best ball websites. That might sound like it's a little bit late for him. I don't know. It's about right. As a matter of fact, I'm kind of pissed off about that price because I don't want to draft Jerry Jeudy. But if I see him there in the 11th round, I'm like, oh, there's Jerry Jeudy, first round pick, talent, the Alabama. But all that stuff is still the idea of Jerry Jeudy has been so much better than the reality of Jerry Jeudy. I implore you, go compare his statistics to Nelson Aguilar's and tell me who's the better player. You can make all the excuses for Jerry Jeudy. Situation's never been right. Quarterback's never been right. I wonder if the quarterback's right in Cleveland. There's no doubt in my mind, this is a better situation than Jerry Jeudy has ever played in, but he also has more target competition than he's ever had.
One of the guys I definitely wanted to get your opinion on, Joe, was Curtis Samuel. He's now going to be the deep threat and the speed guy for the Buffalo Bills. Can he do what Gabe Davis couldn't?
Yeah, this is a guy, I think Matt Harmer from Reception Perception was really excited about this signing. Curtis Samuel, the kind of guy who maybe just slipped under the radar because of the situations he's been in. This is his second multi-year contract for Curtis Samuel. So Curtis Samuel's on his third contract, by the way. So this is a player who the NFL has valued. Remember, he was drafted with Carolina. He just finished out a 3-year contract with the Commanders. The Panthers, though, I thought they miscast him as a vertical threat when they drafted him. He's successfully slid into more of a role as a gadget player and a slot receiver. 91 plus targets and 54 plus receptions in each of his last 4 healthy seasons. He's had groin and hamstring problems. Eric Bieniemy did not involve him in the running game last year, but he is a guy who has been effective in the running game. He has 121 carries and 7 rushing touchdowns over 91 career games. His ADOT, very, very short, though. Last year, just 7.1. He ran basically 70% of his routes from the slot. You would think this move puts Khalil Shakir on the perimeter. Shakir was the primary slot receiver for the Bills last year. But Samuel gets a massive upgrade at quarterback, massive upgrade in offense. Stephon Diggs is entering his age 31 season when he was a ghost down the stretch. I think Samuel is going to compete with Dalton Kincaid to be the chain mover. He's never finished higher than the wide receiver 27, but there is an outside chance that he can be a fantasy difference maker with Buffalo. And at his ADP of the 11th, 12th round, around 130 overall, I'm willing to take that gamble on Curtis Samuel. I think this is one of the most fascinating signings of the period. Maybe he could be a little bit more versatile than he was with the Commanders the last 3 years.
I don't take any gambles with my co-host for Fantasy Feast podcast. I just go with the best. Joe Dolan, at FG_Dolan on social media. Of course, fantasypoints.com is the awesome site where you use the code 24Feast. You can check us out, youtube.com/Ross Tucker NFL. I'm at Ross Tucker NFL. We are at Ross Tucker Pod. I'm stuffed. We're done.
Thanks for tuning in to Fantasy Feast. Make sure to also check out the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, Even Money, and College Draft, all on the DraftKings Network, YouTube, or subscribe to the podcasts on your favorite platform.